Okay, welcome back to another episode of this podcast that doesn't have a name and has no other episodes. I'm your regular host, Eva, sophomore chem major at Mudd, and I want to introduce my lovely guest, Florence.
My name's Florence. I'm a sophomore at the University of Washington. I'm a bioengineering major, and I just took an OChem, and I want to take a nap. Nope, I did not just take an OChem, I took an OChem final.
That's where we're at mentally, folks. Pretty standard around here. One of the things that I want to talk about with this paper is like why we care about corals at all. Anyways, the reason we're talking about corals is because they're really useful as paleoproxies. So we can do that with tree rings. We can also do that with like ice cores. If you've seen how they take the gigantic ice cores out of Antarctica and we can look like hundreds of thousands of years back. And then the reason this abstract stuff matters is because climate change.
Big oof, yeah.
Big oof. Because corals build their own skeletons, mostly out of calcium carbonate. We build our own skeletons. Most things the skeletons build them. But the reason that it's really cool with corals is because corals build theirs from the surrounding seawater. And they build them in layers, kind of like a tree. So like if you were to slice open a coral, and I don't recommend doing this if you don't have like a permit or something.
Catch me next weekend.
But if you slice open a coral, you can actually see layers of it. And it'll be like dark, light, dark, light, dark, light. And they have a yearly cycle. Corals take the surrounding seawater and they turn it into their little skeletons, which is fun. And the cool thing is that they actually modify the composition of the seawater. And this is where we don't totally understand how it works. But what scientists have done is they've grown crystals just out of straight seawater. It's called aragonite. It makes like this almost salmon colored crystal. What's actually forming the crystals is not the salt. It is calcium carbonate. Most of aragonite is calcium carbonate, but what happens is that other trace minerals get mixed in, like strontium and magnesium are kind of the two main ones. And the cool thing about corals is that compared to seawater, they lower the ratio of strontium to calcium and they raise the ratio of magnesium to calcium. The ways in which coral changes its ratios depend on the temperature of the water that it's in. So that is how we can kind of use coral to reconstruct temperature records. We can use corals to reconstruct ocean temperatures for going back a couple hundred years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So pretty much the whole industrial era. And the best part with corals is that it's really localized. Right. But with corals, it's cool. We can actually see like these strong seasonal fluctuations and they look similar to temperature graphs. What we do is we take these corals and we take big cross sections out of them. We like pull out slices of ancient corals and then you split up the sections and then you can break down the sections using acid and then analyze their chemical composition. So we can be like, there's a lot of strontium in this year. What was going on there? And we've been able to kind of use that to figure out what does that tell us about the way the ocean was during that year. So there's a really distinct marker for when ocean temperatures like jump up. And that causes reef bleaching, which is again the stuff they scared us about in like 3rd grade. So they can recover, but these bleaching instances are really useful for us to be able to know about because that happens when temperatures are really high for the region. So like in the summer we can see, oh look, it's pulling in more magnesium relative to calcium and then that ratio will fall a little bit as it gets cooler. We can see those like year to year and they're really consistent, which is super helpful if you are trying to track like, hey, we don't have good temperature records for this summer because our equipment got wiped out. Or it was 1880 and no one was taking temperature records in Australia. So it's really, really helpful if we want to go back and reconstruct. But Part of the problem is we don't totally understand like why. We've been able to see that these things, like we've got this jump in strontium and a drop in magnesium. We're like, that means there was bleaching and it was really warm. But we don't totally know why.